Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. No matter what time of the day or night it is a great time to be a Gamecock. I am Tony, here with Adam. We were both raised as gentlemen, and we know it is ladies first. We are talking Gamecock women's basketball. Coppin State clipped by South Carolina. East Carolina sunk the Pirates. Clemson, they caged the Tigers, and that's more of the game that we are going to be, of course, focusing on. Coppin State, East Carolina, some great offensive outputs, over 90 points in both games, but, of course, you're going to expect that from lesser Division I opponents. But, when you have that Palmetto series and you are playing a big in-state rival like Clemson, great to see the streak continue, taking them down 77-45. I know you watched that game. It was nationally televised, Adam, on ESPN2, and that's where we're going to pick it up before we get into a big top 5 matchup that's on the horizon. But what'd you think about the Garnet and Black taking down that team of orange and purple and white, I guess, whatever?
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit from what we saw earlier in the year, kind of slow start. And it kind of got me worried a bit in that first quarter. Didn't seem like South Carolina could really get going.
Yeah,
or
slow.
Pull away. Yeah, and Clemson held the lead pretty late into that game, I would say, for what the final would end up being.
Yeah, right.
But they held it well into the second quarter, closing in on the half until they went on that 17-0 run. Closed off by that three-pointer.
It was pretty big, yeah.
Yeah,
once this team gets hot, they could stay very hot, just knocking down buckets, and you have that momentum, and they have the talent, they have the shooting ability, they have the pure shooters to do it, and they showed that as they just pulled right away. They left the Tigers in the dust.
They really did. In the second half, it seemed like a completely different game. That first half, like I said, neck and neck for most of it until they started that run, and then second half was when the team really started to show just what they can do to these opponents.
Which is nice on a national stage when you're breaking things down and seeing some of the stat lines. It was very evenly distributed. That's one thing I really noticed from this game, especially once things heated up for them in the second half. But Pow, she was 6 for 15. She poured in 13 points. Ashlyn Watkins off the bench put in 10. She was 4 for 8. And then just a lot of similar stat lines between 4, 5, 6, 7 points. Mylasia Fulwiley. Maddie McDaniel. Freshman, babyface freshman, number 1, put in 7 points. She was 3 for 3 on her field goals and 1 for 1 3-point range. So it's nice to see some of the newer faces even starting to put up some scoring numbers. And that's just going to be something as we start to see more of this team gel together from top to bottom. It's a very well-rounded roster. I'm going to continue to say that throughout the year, say they're talented just because they are. And it's nice when you're not going to have all that production from your starters, that you easily can have that on the bench, because one big thing when we talk about basketball is 5 players out there. It's not football. It's not a huge squadron of players out there. It's just 5, and there's only so much room for 5 very good players when you're talking about top 10 teams, because you're going to have the upper echelon of players likely come into your program like South Carolina has. So it's just more of the longevity of the game, being able to wear Clemson down like they did and just be able to have those fresh legs and plenty of great shooters off your bench as opposed to just the starting 5.
Yeah, and I think it's a real testament to the program of how talented this roster is top to bottom, where you score 77 points and your top score is 13. It's very well balanced, and you don't have to rely on the one person to really just go crazy and score these points. You can just have everyone contributing offensively, defensively in these situations.
It's great. It really is, when you're just trying to break down the roster and see who is going to fit where, what different rotations are going to work, different sizing up on the court and how that could play a factor. Because eventually South Carolina is going to start to go down the road here, Adam, and they're going to start to face a little bit more size in the front court. They're going to start to face taller players. We'll get to that in a second with UCLA, but hasn't really been a big issue yet. But, they're definitely going to miss Camila Cardoso. Yeah, that's going to be a tough loss down the stretch, because you had someone that is, pushing 6'8", 6'9". You had her as a designated center, always a great safety blanket to have there under the basket. And when you're not going to have that, that could come back to bite you against quality opponents. So as we leave the Tigers in the dust, as we said, I do want to give a shout out to actually one of their best players of the game, who also has one of the best names in the game, Loyal McQueen.
Loyal McQueen.
Loyal McQueen.
No relation to Lightning, I assume.
No relation to Lightning McQueen, but great name. And she is actually from Florence, South Carolina.
Really?
Yeah, senior guard, and she had a pretty nice game. She put in 15 points, and she was 50% from three-point range. But aside from her stats, just great name in general.
I think we got to start putting together, for the end of the season, come tournament time, put together an East versus West Bowl type roster for all the great names.
I still remember
like
Silas Swords. Silas Swords from Michigan. So,
we'll have to keep these names in the back of our heads for when that comes around.
Yeah, good for future reference as we keep on. The ladies are moving on, and as we go into this intriguing matchup, especially to this point now where I'm looking at the standings and, just trying to look up initially UCLA and more of their stat line and their players. I was just going into it, not even thinking about anything, but thinking, oh yeah, should be a Pac-12 related website with their athletics. But oh yeah, that's right. Big Ten now. Big Ten. Still getting used to that. In that regard. But big matchup already. And they've already, of course, had some really intriguing matchups, especially with the Alley tip-off up against NC State when they dispatched them in Charlotte. But this one is going to be on the road. This one is going to be at Pauley Pavilion. It's where they play in LA. So this is going to be a tough one. And it's interesting to me, Adam, when I was looking at ticket prices and how they designate things out there. It's weird, and from what I can tell on resale sites, it looks like everything other than more of the initial sections right around the court, it's all general admission.
Really?
And you could get tickets like $10 to $20.
What?
For this type of game, for a top
5 matchup,
top
you can
five,
get $20?
Yes. So even though
in LA.
Oh
my God.
Even though the women's game has been growing at an exponential rate, and there's a lot more people interested in it. That's what I was seeing. Really, really reasonable ticket prices. And, you're not going to see that. Say we were hosting UCLA or, looking ahead to a game such as UConn here at Colonial Life Arena. You're not going to get tickets like that. You're like, look at those prices.
Yeah, I just pulled it up here on
ridiculous.
On $20, 26, 27. Yeah.
Cheap.
And then I guess if you got a little closer, you're getting up in like the 50s. Ooh. But still, for a top 5 matchup, right? $50 is kind of crazy.
So that's to the point I want to make here. I don't know what kind of fan atmosphere is going to be there. It's a weird time. We're going into a weekend here right before Thanksgiving, so students are making travel. So that might very much play into the favor of South Carolina. This might not be a program, even though they've had some very good women's teams, that really is getting that fan support like we've seen from years past. The UCLA is a blue blood when it comes to men's basketball. Yeah, they've had championships. They've had very successful seasons. From the women's standpoint, I'm not sure yet. There are some schools that really pack them in there. LSU, of course, comes to mind. South Carolina, of course, we do here. Other schools in the Carolinas, even North Carolina and Duke. But maybe not so much UCLA, just looking at those ticket prices. So I'm hopeful that the fan atmosphere isn't going to be a huge factor here. It'll be perhaps not a true neutral court game with it being in LA, but might not be a big driving factor with noise and with a crowd factor from what I'm looking at.
And one thing I think we have to remember, especially as students or former students, graduated students of
yes, sir.
A D1 school, it's Thanksgiving week.
It
so
is.
how many of these students have gone home,
exactly.
not in town to watch this matchup, or will stick around to watch this matchup, which is something that we used to do back in Penn State. We would stay the extra day before going home, depending on who the matchup was for the football game.
Sometimes football and sometimes basketball games.
Sometimes basketball,
depending
if it was a big
on,
game.
Yeah, easily
go back early, leave late if it was a good matchup. So it's all going to depend on, I guess, how loyal the UCLA fan base is for this women's basketball team, but I'm not too sure how loyal it is. It's hard to gauge because, I'm not a big UCLA viewer.
No, that's the thing.
It's hard to guess what it's going to be like.
Especially as they're just joining the Big Ten Conference. We've been Penn State fans for a long time before making the move to South Carolina, before getting fully ingrained into Gamecock Nation, but it's not a team or a program I've really been too familiar with. USC a little bit more. especially from a football standpoint. But yeah, I'm not really sure what to expect and what the atmosphere is going to be like out there, unless, again, they surprise and there's just this random group of thousands and thousands of people that show up. And it deservedly so. I wish that was the case, just from the standpoint of it being an incredible game, because it is. You have a top 5 matchup on a Sunday afternoon. It is going to be an incredible game. It has the makings of it. So that, of course, is something that we have to keep our eyes on, just to see how packed it's going to be as we go on to that. So we are going to be looking into UCLA, or UCLA. UCLA, as I like to
I saw that on that
call
app.
them.
It was had South Carolina as 75% chance on that.
And ESPN's analytics.
Yeah, ESPN's analytics.
Yeah.
So.
And to be fair, just a shout out to a lot of the stat keepers. A lot of the stuff I like to use from a statistical standpoint, seeing how they're broken down on teams, I do like to use ESPN.com for that. And yeah, some of their analytics can be pretty good, and they're very helpful. And that's also where I am looking at the Bruins stats for this year. Undefeated, just like we are, ranked number 5 for number 1. And the big player that is figuratively and literally we need to watch out for with them will be Lauren Betts, their center. She is, I've seen different listings between 6'7" and 6'8", but she is very tall. She is a great scorer, and she is pouring in a double-double on average per game. She's putting in 21.5 points a game and 11.5 rebounds a game.
Insane.
Also, 7 assists a game.
Some 2K numbers.
And 2 blocks per game.
Oh, my goodness.
So
yeah, you can see how big that comes in handy. We saw that in Clemson with all the turnovers and the rebounds really playing a key factor for USC.
Yeah.
Taking control of that game. So it's going to be pretty rough to have it on the opposite end now. Someone who can not only do it, does it regularly enough that those are her averages.
Yeah, from what I'm looking at, just to see her skill set and how she factors into the rest of the roster, she's somewhat like their Camila Cardoso, like I was just referencing before, but she just seems to have a little bit more of that passing tenacity. Still, man, miss Camila, really do. But it's just because you're larger in size doesn't mean you're going to have the same skills. Like sometimes you're not going to have as good of a shooting stroke. Sometimes you will. Sometimes you're better just being a facilitator, finding other players on the court. And yeah, Lauren really is. So between the assists, the rebounds, the blocks, and the points, she is going to be a tough one to contain, and she is definitely going to be a focal point of that offense unless, Dawn maybe draws something up trying to double team her, maybe with Chloe and with Ashlyn down low. It's going to be tough just from the height standpoint, because when you have a player that is that talented with that type of height, it's just tough to defend. Like, there's only so much you can do. There's only so many inches that your wingspan could reach up to. So that's going to be a big factor, a big problem, possibly, for the Gamecocks out in L.A.
Ryan, reminds me of a few years ago when Penn State played Purdue, had to deal with Zach Edey, and it just seemed like an impossibility to defend a guy that tall.
The guy was so damn annoying. I'm telling you, every game, just chucking it under the basket, put it in. Chuck it under the basket, put it in.
It was like putting stuff on a shelf for him. It was ridiculous. Once you're against shorter opponents, it becomes super easy for people like that, players like that, to just take ball, put it in net.
Yeah, and he was 7'1",
something like that. Some massive man, but that's the kind of thing you have to learn to overcome. And I have full faith that they will, but it's going to be a challenge.
It is. So she is going to be the big one to watch. But also, and this is from the shooting aspect. So under the basket, she could still have a nice touch, but under the basket, she is going to be definitely trying to bully her way down there. The other player really to look out for is forward Tamea Gardner. Now, Tamea Gardner is putting in a similar amount of minutes to Lauren. She's scoring 14 points a game, but the stat line for her is her free throw percentage, 100%.
Wow.
Okay. So
on how many attempts does it say?
That I'm not seeing here, at least as opposed to just general points. I'm not seeing exactly how many free throws she's taken. But either way, I mean, to have that stat line already, especially for someone that's putting in a lot of minutes, like I am seeing another player with 100%, but she has a fraction of the minutes and a very small fraction of the points. So she's getting to the basket, especially being a forward. So we see that. She is shooting 58% from 3.
Wow.
Solid. and just overall shooting 55% field goal percentage, just on shooting in general. And she is going to be, I'm sure it's a little bit of a 1-2 punch with Lauren from what I've been able to analyze from their gameplay. So they like to utilize their bigs a lot. Another guard that is pouring in 12 points is Alina Arnisalo. Alina Arnisalo, or it might be Arnisalo. I'm trying to get some of these names. There's always one player with a difficult name that I cannot just find, even upon some research, pronunciations. But she is a guard. She's scoring over 12 points a game, and she is putting in a 43% three-point percentage. So they do have some shooters out there. It's not just all going to be ground and pound. It's not just going to be trying to get that offensive rebounding in. It's not just going to be trying to fight for this game under the basket. They know how to spread it out. That's why they're a top 5 program. They have shooters on this floor that they could easily put it up. But to that factor, they're also going to be able to feed it down low. And Lauren definitely has the potential to feast down there, just with our bigs being a little bit shorter than her.
Yeah, and that height difference is going to be something they're going to have to. Obviously, they're well aware of it, I'm sure, but they just going to have to find a way to game plan around it. Just take that away. Take away the physical aspect if you can.
And that's going to be tough to do. It really is when you're talking about just some size differentials that are going to be in play. And that just from me eyeballing the roster, seeing some of the height differentials, seeing how they've been trying to win these games, that still should be more of the factor. I just stated, they do have shooters out there. A lot of their shooting percentages are good, pretty solid. You got a few three-point shooters that are 40% or higher. But their fourth leading scorer, just quickly down the roster here, Janiyah Barker, she is putting in 11 points a game, as she has only 9% three-point percentage. I assume that she just tried to pop one up, but she is scoring 75%, and I assume that she really tries to work down low. So 3 of your top 4 scorers are center with Lauren, Tamaya, forward, and Janiyah, forward. So you're getting a lot of your production down low under the basket. So they might be trying to play bully ball out in LA for a lot of this game, as opposed to trying to hit more three-pointers. So that might be where South Carolina tries to get that edge, whether it's going to be Pow or just whether it's going to be Johnson. She hopefully can, and that's going to be something as we go down the line here we have to keep talking about, and we really work to see them just trying to find a factor of this program that can overcome where UCLA might be falling flat a bit for the day.
Yeah, and you see that.
I'm sorry, that's Tessa Johnson, by the way, because we have two. We have Raven and Tessa, so
that's right.
And I mean that with Tessa, just because Tessa has been doing an incredible job as a pure shooter. And also, just want to toss in here before I get back to you, she's also shooting 57% from 3, Tessa Johnson, this year. So she's also
got a sharpshooter.
Also lighting it up with Pow.
You gotta love. That's what made me fall in love with the women's basketball game, this evolution of now the three-pointers. It makes it so much more entertaining as a casual fan, because I'm far from a diehard, at least at that point. But it has become so much more entertaining to watch these sharpshooters just nailing these three-pointers.
So good, yeah, and it's just something that was publicized a lot more. You saw it a lot with Caitlin Clark, and that's where a lot of the highlight reels were. Still, to the chagrin of a lot of fans that want to see more of their players getting these highlights, she was just going to be the one stepping back a little bit further, nailing these really long threes, and just akin a little bit, just going back to the men's game briefly with Jimmer Fredette, how he made those crazy three-pointers very far from downtown. And that's just something that's going to garner more attention. But we have our own stable of fantastic shooters in this program. And as this game continues to grow, as the women's game expands, you're going to see more of this talent just continue to pop up. You're going to see more of these programs in the top 10 and top 15 being able to go toe-to-toe with top 5 programs. That really is something in women's basketball that wasn't there. There was a steep drop-off, really, once you got usually out of the top 5 or 6. But now you're starting to see more of these talented players coming out of the woodwork. And I think that that's just going to be something as you get further and further into this decade and beyond. You're going to start to see that talent gap shrink a bit like it is in the men's game. Like there's plenty of opportunity where you could easily see the number 1 or 2 team in the country even fall to an unranked team. It just happens because there's not that wide of a talent gap amongst teams. And that is something that's just going to make it tougher and tougher to try and have a dynasty, to try and repeat as champions. So South Carolina, while they have this incredible roster now and still have some of these advantages over other programs, you got to take advantage in the short term because it's definitely not getting easier. And I'm very interested to see how some of this talent that has grown at a program like UCLA is going to try to, bully, is going to try to, knock around South Carolina down low and keep them off balance.
Yeah, you'll see that across all sports. You'll see these teams that are more physical, bigger, more physically imposing. They use that to their advantage because it is such an advantage. You see that in the NFL, you see that in college football, these big offensive lines, these guys like Iowa, Minnesota, those teams that have really big offensive linemen, they will try and just impose on other players on the defensive line. See that in basketball now. You have a height advantage, you're going to make sure you use it.
Of course, and that's something in women's basketball it's still just a little bit iffy because in the women's game, at least still right now, as long as you are hitting that shooting stroke and you have an incredible shooting percentage for a game and your three-point shooters are on, you could still overcome a lack of size. You're not always going to be able to play bully ball with some teams, especially if they have a 6'9", 6'10" center. That's going to be really tough just from the height standpoint. But when you are in the college game, you're going to face more of those issues. In pro sports, you're going to have a lot more of just of a finely developed roster of players that are drafted, that are crafted by a general manager. Colleges recruit players. So you're still going to have a roster that is crafted, but you're not going to be able to cherry pick players and put them in certain positions to be 100% successful from a business standpoint. That happens in the NBA and the WNBA. WNBA getting more of that attention now. But you could easily see when you look at these games how different some of these rosters can look. And you're not always going to have one player to try and match up against another. In pro sports, you're more than likely going to see that, especially in a 5v5 game like basketball. It's a lot simpler to do. But at the college level, there's just such a wide range of teams and programs from smaller conferences that are going to be able to get knocked around, that are going to be able to be beaten down a lot easier just because they can't have the longevity of the game. They can't last into the game, whether it's just because they straight up don't have the talent. They don't really have the confidence to put players on the bench that are out there. They really, the only chance they have is to keep the starters out there as long as they can, or, you're just going to exhaust yourselves, or you're just going to put players out there that aren't ready to compete with quality Division I talent, women that are ready to play in the WNBA in a year or two or three. And that's just going to be how it is. There's always going to be someone better than you out there or trying to be better than you. And with this newfound growth of this game like there is, it's not going to get any easier. It is really not. And this is just a game I am worried about a little bit because it's just a little bit more of an unknown opponent in the way of, hey, you're going out there, you're going to be trying to just have a little bit of a different recipe than we have last year's championship program. It doesn't mean that you can't still run the table. It doesn't mean you still can't win a national title, but you have to figure out something different now because you don't have that really big center, really consistent safety net down low. So if we're not hitting that shooting stroke, if we're not seeing players like Malaysia, not seeing Tessa, not seeing Pau hitting those deeper shots, it's going to be tougher. It's really going to make it tougher down the stretch because we can't just keep pounding it down low. We have a lot of great mid-range size players, when you're talking about the heights of anywhere from 6 foot to 6'5", but when you don't have that really big center entrenched in your game that you can consistently count on to score, it's just going to make things a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I mean that's just why you're thankful to have someone like Dawn as leading your team.
Yes,
because you have a brain that knows how to play to your players' advantages and play against the other team's disadvantages.
I really couldn't have said that better myself. No, and she's just such a talented coach. When you're trying to piece players in different spots and trying to make sure that the roster you have works no matter what your opposition is going to be, it's a big factor. So I really will look to see, when we go through these quarters, especially if South Carolina starts out slow on the shooting end, where she's going to try to, piece together where people are going. Now, if South Carolina comes out shooting hot and they can continue that throughout the game, I don't think they're going to have a problem with UCLA, but that has been something that's already happened. As you mentioned before, Adam, twice. Michigan, it was a very slow start. Even against teams like Clemson, it was a slow start. And you just can't do that in games like this. They are way too talented. You cannot go into a game like this when you're now making that jump from, all right, fringe top 10 like North Carolina State was, now to UCLA, who seemingly just has some players that could score at will, especially vets down low under the basket. So you really need to come out shooting hot, or this is going to be a dogfight out there. It is going to be tough for the Gamecocks if you're not coming out fast. You can't be a second half team. This is something where you need to hit UCLA in the mouth early.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot in other sports where teams, they're really good, they're very talented, but they just can't get going fast enough. And then that works sometimes. Like we've seen it with Penn State. It's usually a second half team. Came out slow against USC, Southern California, and then they came back in the second half, overcame the deficit, won the game. It's not always going to be like that. There's going to be teams that are super talented, and they're going to come out shooting, and if you take a while, you're a slow start, it's going to come back to bite you, because then there's a chance that this deficit's too big to overcome. So it really does matter playing all 4 quarters, playing 100% up to your ability, at least in these big games where it will come back to bite you. You have a start like that against Clemson, you still have that talent and the ability to come back and stay with it, of course, until you can get going, and then you see them break out in the second half, even in the second or the last few minutes of the second quarter. But a team like UCLA, they probably won't be as forgiving as a slow start against Clemson, a slow start against Michigan. And even Michigan, that was a close game.
It was.
So you really can't, especially in these very, very big games against these powerful opponents, you cannot risk a slow start. You have to get going fast. And if you come out shooting and then the other team can't get going quite as fast, now that's where you really have to strike. You have to make sure to drive the nail home.
Yeah, that is going to be something that is just difficult to see if you are trying to climb a hill. One thing I always like to say when we're talking about sports and the longevity of a game, whether it is basketball, whether it's football, whether it's hockey, whatever, whatever sports you like to watch, you can't be climbing a hill the whole time, because that is only going to make it a little bit tougher on your players. It is going to make game plan tougher. If you can try to get out to that lead early, try to take away some confidence from your opposition, it's going to be a great thing to do, because it's only going to make it easier on yourselves. And you can't just magically say, hey, get out there, make those threes. Do it. You have to. You have to make those shots. You have to create those opportunities, and you have to feel confident going into this game. So with that in mind, going back to what I said before, it definitely will play into the favor of South Carolina if this crowd really isn't as raucous as the potential that they could have been, depending on where you're going to play a top 5 basketball matchup. Just when you hear that, you think, oh man, it must be a crazy crowd. They're going to be packing them in there. They're going to be trying to knock off number 1 South Carolina. But that's not necessarily going to be the case because of holidays, because of possibly the lack of interest that hasn't grown to a full potential yet for schools like UCLA, like it has for some others. So this all is going to be swirling around into, hey, if you're not going to be really impacted a lot by crowd noise, if they're going to give you perhaps some of this space early to try and put up those threes, you got to do it, and you got to hope you can hit it, because they are undefeated just like us, and they've put in some very solid games as well. Starting out the season, they knocked off Louisville, number 17 at the time, 66-59, so a little bit closer with that, but you could just really throw those first games of the year out the window, especially top 25 matchups, because you're both coming into that game very rusty, just like we did against Michigan. That game could have went either way if we didn't really tighten things up at the end there. But then we really start to settle in. You're starting to see South Carolina beating up opponents a bit more, just like they did. They beat Colgate by over 20 points. They beat Pepperdine at 91-54. And then Arkansas, man, oh man, they said woo pig. They said no pig, no pig. Man, 101-52, put a 100 burger on the Razorbacks.
Yeah, basically doubled up an SEC team, right?
Yeah, that's impressive. That's impressive. And that's what I mean. So, this isn't just going to be a team that, can defend well and try to stifle you under the basket. They can put up numbers, and that was the most impressive game of the year so far for them. And that wasn't that long ago. That was on November 17th. They put up over 100 points on Arkansas. So this is going to be a very intriguing one. I haven't seen Vegas set a line yet from what I've seen on the ESPN app, and they usually do post the betting lines. This is one that's definitely going to be featured. They don't feature every single women's game, but every South Carolina game, I believe, so far has been taken up by the sports book in Vegas. So that's going to be an interesting line that is set, but that is Sunday. That is going to be tomorrow, 4 p.m. Well, depending on when you listen to this, maybe it might be today, depending on when you're catching this podcast, or it might have been yesterday. Who knows? But yeah, if you are catching it before the game, it's 4 p.m. Fox Sports 1, FS1. Going to be a fantastic Sunday matchup. A clash of the Titans here with South Carolina and UCLA going at it. You got to love top 5 games this early in the season. It's going to mean a big loss for one program, but also a loss that you could easily recover from. That's why you have these big games, just to try and show, hey, how do we stack up against this team that easily could be there in the Final Four? And, whether we win, whether we lose, it's not going to be the biggest deal if we lose, because still a top 5 team, especially if you're the team that's on the road. Now, if South Carolina can overcome that, it's just going to continue the legacy that they are already settling with right now.
Yeah, and I think right now, UCLA is a start of a pretty tough stretch of games. You have UCLA number 5, Iowa State number 8, then you have unranked Purdue, then number 14 Duke, number 19 TCU. So if you can go through this and come out undefeated, that is huge. 1, for the season, but 2, for this win streak that they have going on.
It's impressive. I would love to see this continue to be into the 50s, into the 60s, but just the way that the schedule was laid out this year, the way that contracts are laid out, the way they're trying to get more of these players, better NIL opportunities and money, you're going to want to have opportunities like this and big nationally televised games, because that's going to give you that opportunity to make that money, to get more eyeballs on your school and the other school that you're playing. So these top 25 matchups are just going to be a consistent thing throughout the season. You will see it eventually in the SEC schedule, because you have to play your conference opponents as it is, but they also play UConn later this season as well, so that's going to be another fantastic one. But yeah, up to this point, it's just going to be left hook, right hook, left hook, right hook. All of these teams coming at South Carolina, whether they are home or away or on a neutral floor, just all of this going into the holiday season to further grow the interest in the sport and being like, oh, yeah, wow, I want to watch that game. And all these top 5 or top 25 matchups, it's going to be so fun. Man, this is just such a fun team to watch, because they're not just playing cupcakes. They're playing all these great programs. I want to see if my school can knock them off. And it's, as I said, that's why these are all going to be nationally televised games, because rightfully so. People want to watch them.
Yeah, and people want to be the team to knock them off.
That too.
So there's going to be a lot of national intrigue when a win streak goes this long. There's 2 people, and one is, oh, I wonder how far they can go, and then the other is, I want to see this end. And it's even better if you are a UCLA fan, if you're a TCU fan. One of these teams coming up on the schedule, if this win streak is still going, you want to be the people to knock them off.
Yeah, you'll be one of the biggest sports stories of the day or that week.
Yeah, and that is eyes on you and your program, which is only better for recruiting, for NIL deals, stuff like that. If you can take down a giant, that's going to be great for you. But if you are the giant, which USC is proving to be, that's why they're going to want to continue this dominance.
It's very true, and it's funny that you say that too, because just thinking of these teams from out west as well, UCLA and California's USC, but of course here on the East Coast, claim that USC for South Carolina. The lesser USC out on the West Coast, that's right. But they're really good too. Man, between them and UCLA, both top 10 women's basketball programs this year. So Southern California, I'm not sure if they're putting in the water out there, but they are fielding some very good teams. And those are both teams that could be there in the Final Four as we look towards the end of the year. Coming out of, reminder, the Big Ten, no longer the Pac-12. Now USC that way, and UCLA, USC West. They are going to be in the Big Ten and competing in that in that conference space for the first time. So it will be intriguing to see how that all pans out as we're going to be all said and done in that regard. But it's just going to be a lot of these programs that are getting better. You know, I'm just looking at these rosters. I was actually talking about this with someone at work yesterday. When you're looking into a lot of the preseason polls and just some of the, you know, the pundits that are trying to analyze WNBA draft talent and who are the best players. You know, most of the top 25 lists or top 20 players in NCAA, only a couple of them are South Carolina players too. You know, the top ones is Pow Pow, and some people don't even have her in the top 8. So that's just one big point I want to keep making. There are a lot of other talented players, and there are teams out there that have a multitude of them, more than one of these players on their team. USC out west is going to be one of the ones to make that point, and UConn as well. You got Paige Beckers. She is going to be a tough one to unseat. Incredible player. And just when you see more of the well-rounded game of a lot of these women, it's only going to keep getting better and better. And this is something I will keep harping on throughout the year, keep going back to as we get into these podcasts more in depth. You're just going to see that little added spark, that bit of an added motivation, because there's more eyes on the sport. There are crowds. There's nationally televised audiences. There's money to be had. This was not here 5 years ago in the women's game. It's all here now. Going throughout this decade, it has been an incredible fluctuation of growth and eyes on the sport, and it's just exciting to talk about. I'm loving it, and it's great for these women, great for the game, and it gives sports fans, especially for those wanting to, seeking out more things to watch, something to watch, because you should be.
Yeah, I mean, even like I said, a few years ago, I wasn't watching women's basketball, and when we moved down here, USC, obviously a very good program, very great program, I should say.
Yeah, right.
A great program to watch. And then you had last year these personalities and talents just explode onto the scene. Like Caitlin Clark, she was a lot of fun. Her little tiff with Angel Reese.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
that was everywhere.
That was everywhere.
That was all over social media.
That was on ESPN, Bleacher Report. All of these outlets are covering it because it's exciting.
Whether you loved or hated them.
Yeah, and you had a side which made it easier to follow, because if you liked Caitlin Clark, personally, really like Caitlin Clark, and I mean that's what made me really start to watch women's basketball was, there's this. One of my favorite players for the NBA in the 2010s was Steph Curry. You have women's basketball Steph Curry playing. I'm going to watch. And then I get into USC, and it's like, oh, this is actually way better of a product than I remember it being, and now I'm watching it basically every week.
Well, and she was easy to play the villain role as well because of her fame, and that was just another big thing when I was watching the game. And I know a lot of South Carolina fans, just to that point of wanting to knock them off, wanting to claim that title, especially from what happened the prior year. You know, you want to get that championship. You wanted to knock off Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes, and they did, and that made last year's title all the more sweeter, keeping Caitlin away from that title. So it was definitely her going and settling into that villain role for a team like ours with the Gamecocks, because you not only wanted to keep up the potential to have a dynasty for Dynasty, or you wanted to just, you wanted to unseat this, potentially unseatable figures. Like, can't let Caitlin win that title. We're going to keep her down. Got to have this over her. Yes, she got more of the publicity, number 1 pick in the WNBA draft, but you know what? Doesn't have that ring. Guess what? South Carolina does, and that was one of the big factors last year. And there was just the interest in that. That's why there was over 15 million people watching that national title game, because of the intrigue of it. It was like, is Caitlin going to be enough to knock off the South Carolina team, or can she not overcome this well-rounded roster? We got the answer.
Yeah, that's what a big thing I was talking about earlier. How everything was so evenly dispersed in that Clemson game.
Mm-hmm.
It was star power versus a full roster, and we saw how that clashed in the title game.
It's tough. You can have one really good player. Which is great. Do it on up. Thrust her out into the spotlight. Get her some great NIL deals and money because it's deserved. But you cannot sustain a national championship run without a deep bench. I don't care where you're looking. I don't care what kind of sport it is. You need to be able to have that depth because without it, it's just going to be difficult because seasons are long. Personalities can clash sometimes in some programs. We're not always going to see teams that are all friends and all buddy-buddy behind the scenes. I will say, from what I see on social media, South Carolina does have an incredible locker room atmosphere. They really do, on the surface, appear all to be friends. You can't trust everything you see on social media, but I do get an incredible vibe from South Carolina that they truly love each other, being around each other. They have each other's backs, and that really helps to the on-court product as well because, you're out there playing with your friends. You're out there playing with your friends. You're not just out there
competing on your own in a game you're playing. Yeah, and it makes it a lot easier to compete when you're friends with someone. Obviously, you want to keep lifting them up.
It's fun. It's fun at that point.
But you also have your chemistry with them because you know them so well, and that's what makes. I think that's the oil in the machine of South Carolina.
You're hyping someone else up. You're hitting that behind the back pass, or bounce pass, or just where someone is going to be, just from pure vibes sometimes. From that friendship aspect, along with the skill aspect that our beloved Gamecock women have, and this is going to be an interesting test that they are put up against. So. Reminders again, FS1, 4 o'clock at UCLA. That's 4 o'clock Eastern time, mind you. Of course, it'll be 1 p.m. out on the West Coast. What's going on, my man?
Well, I wanted to ask if you wanted to make a little special announcement about what we'll be doing during that game.
Yes, we would like to actually do a live stream during that game and see how it goes through our YouTube page. I'll try to get a little bit more out from my Facebook as well, but of course we'll make sure to, no surprise, we'll make the time to, watch the game, I guess, tomorrow, right? But we would like to do a live stream of that, see how that goes, try to get some live feedback and interactions between when we post this podcast, which is going to be at some point Saturday afternoon or evening, November 23rd, and the start of that game against UCLA, Sunday, the 24th, at 4 for someone who might just be happening to listen to this at some other random time. But that is going to be our goal for tomorrow. And just, would really love to start getting more video out there. I know we want to start doing video podcast. That's only going to make things easier and much more eye-catching when we're having these discussions and trying to break things down. And also, we'll eventually piggyback off of that soon as well, because we want to have guests on this podcast. It doesn't need to just be us. We want to be able to talk to fans, talk to players, talk to Don, hopefully. That'd be nice. That's going to be all a work in progress as we are still small, still growing, but we shall get there. We're working on it.
Absolutely. And it'll be our first live stream on this channel, so hopefully we'll be able to minimize the hiccups, but it'll be a learning experience, as this is something that, for both podcasts that we have going, I think it would be fun to have these little watch-alongs. We see some content creators have done it. Some of these football guys, they'll do a watch along when their team is playing in a big game, and this is hard to find a bigger regular season game than a 1 versus 5 in one of the big early season matchups.
Yes.
So very excited to try this out, see how it goes, and of course, being in a live stream means we can interact with fans while it's happening. So hopefully, you guys listening will be able to tune in. Have a little chat with us while we all root for the Gamecocks.
That's right, because it is going to be a big one, and we shall see what goes on out in LA. It is going to be a clash of the Titans, as stated before, so we shall see, as this game serves as a fantastic benchmark for where the Gamecocks are at, how they can battle back against some size and shooting ability that is really going to be thrown at them out on the West Coast. But look out for that live stream. I will likely try to have some more information coming out from my Facebook and perhaps another giveaway or two. That is all going to be coming up on Sunday, and I cannot wait. So thank you again for being with us here, everybody. I am Tony, here with Adam. You have found, and hopefully will continue to be listening to, the Ladies First podcast, part of the Northern South Sports Network, and that is going to be our YouTube page. If you haven't subscribed or liked it yet, you should. Go find it. It is at the Northern South. And thank you again. I appreciate y'all being here. We are looking forward to a fantastic matchup tomorrow. We will see you next time.